Hiding between the toes at the foot end of the British Isles are the strangest fish we can encounter in this country. Or at least, the strangest biggie. They're the only ones that can swim backwards, the longest of our species. To some the ugliest, to others the most beautiful. To everyone who fishes for them, they're certainly the strongest. They're mean, they're moody, they're magnificent. We are of course talking about the conger eel. I've been chasing this particular species around the wrecks and reefs off Cornwall and Devon for over 25 years now. Some people say I've even started to look like a conger, especially in the girth. Doesn't seem to matter where in the world I fish though. Shark, marlin, giant skate, weird beasties and jungles and deserts. I always seem to wend my weary way back to the wheel world and head to Plymouth for some saltwater bunny chasing. It's the start of a new season. I'm back out with old rival Roger Herity. Emphasis on the word old. I'm a little wider and he's a little wiser. Even my hair's put on weight. Roger's certainly hasn't. We're joined by my freshwater and television angling partner Dave Watson for what can only be considered a somewhat early opportunity to go congering. It's definitely early for him. He's never been before. It's March, and there was such a neat hole in the weather, we've cleaned the mothballs out of the conger tackle boxes, and here we are at the start of a day which kicks off as usual with the hunt for the bait. But are the mackerel around yet?
Clear. Nothing on the Hawkeye lure, what a shame. They're better for dropping slowly, aren't they? Yeah. I tell you, these black feathers are really successful, you know.
That's another string full.
Black feathers! Never listen to Roger Herity in his can't catch mackerel on black feather. I'm slaying him.
Kamikaze mackerel, these are.
Owl right up the arm.
There must be millions of them down there.
Yes.
As if by divine intervention, as soon as we'd caught enough, the mackerel disappeared. As did everything else for the next 3 hours. And I mean everything. We moved to the chosen wreck, confident with a box full of bait, and proceeded to spend the next 2 hours of our lives completely blanking. Not even a pout. By then, the banter had died away. Silence reigned as each of us settled into real fisherman mode. Hardly a word was spoken as we worked intensely without a bite for yet another hour. Then suddenly, I got a gentle take. After a brief pull, the eel dropped the flapper. Bill tut-tutted me. I lowered the bait, oh so gently, to the bottom again, trying to find the same spot. And nothing happened for another 3 minutes.
A load of pollocks.
Patience mixed with disappointment and a touch of panic. As a TV angler, you often feel the camera's a jinx. Then this happened.
I'll take this rod. Oh yeah.
There you go, Dick. I think it's an E1.
Bill's boat's a bit in eel, yeah.
Well, you're still on the tracks.
It ain't going back down for a minute, so. that's better. Bill? Can you come to my left?
Whatever I'll do on your left hand side.
Yes, please.
What's a conger?
Here we go. Let's grab the footage in the water for a minute. I've got Dave's line, yeah?
Yeah.
What a nice one here.
It's not bad, is it?
No, that is a nice
Nice
one.
start for the day.
That's
Get
what
the
you
head.
wanted.
That's the one.
Get on there.
All right.
That's a 45 pounder.
45. Oh, I'm nicely up, Bill.
Very
Yeah?
good.
We ain't going to lose that fish in a hurry. There we go.
Just what you wanted.
Now, my friend, you can swing out a hand, or do you want me to run her off from it because she's still a bit green?
You do whatever you want to do here.
Right, let's gonna let the fish.
We're not going to tell it, are we?
No, no. I'll tie her out a little. Go on, go down, go down, go down, go down. Whoosh.
Very good.
Pretty. There we go. You gonna lift that by hand, Alex?
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah.
She's got a fat head. On the spin.
Do you want it in the boat, do you?
Yes, let's have a look. Let's have a look. Tell me when you got the load. All right?
Oh, look at me. I've got the gloves on.
Come on, Alex, more porridge. Whoosh.
No,
That's a good 40, isn't it?
No, that's a 50 pounder.
We gone 50?
Yeah.
I reckon so. Slack line.
That's why I shot them on bullet.
I bet you did. It's just, oops.
That is a nice fish.
Yes. This time
We
of year,
made
that's
50 then,
gorgeous.
Bill. I reckon she is. She's pretty
This time
thick.
of year, that's good.
I reckon that'll go 50 pounds. What do you think,
Pretty
Roger?
thick. Hello, baby. This is the only time you'll see me standing between the legs of Bill Warner out of Plymouth. But it's one way of us measuring a fish that is in excess of 50 pounds. We've used the gaff through the lip, a bronze hook, which will rust away. We may even try and get it out first, and then she's back over the side. Wonderful beastie. In the words of that famous Roman angler, I came, I saw, I conquered. Big Bill, big fish. Thank you very much. We're back over the side. I haven't got strength. Go with her. Swim away. Swim away. Main fish in British waters without a swim bladder, 230 feet, back down to the wreck. Bit porked off, but a little wiser. And I'm knackered.
That was a good start to the year. Caught on the 30th of March, it was an early big eel, when really we should have been pollocking. Guess how many others came in that day? None. So I was the lucky one. This of course makes the rest of the video much easier for me. I can blank for the next 50 minutes, rabbit away about tackle and techniques, and as long as the others catch, then I'm sure you'll let me off having shown you a 50-pounder. Roger became ling basher for the day, which thoroughly pleased Mrs. Roger. She likes a good ling, they say.
But this
But what
stone
a
is
day.
called Eddie.
He had a wonderful
You've got a piece of
stone.
coal.
One of the
That's
best
your
we've
ball.
ever seen.
This is Eddie
I
Stone.
mustn't mock. Chances are next time we're in some jungle or desert together, looking for elusive biggies, he'll probably slay me.
I'm leaving. I'm taking my rod. I'm going over the camera and I'm leaving.
Well, it gave me a hell of a bite, but it didn't play very much.
I'll say, as far as stone goes, that's the best stone I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That's a real cracking stone, that is.
Yeah.
I think if I wanted to catch a stone, it would be one
Mauled
of
the
ours.
weight. You see how it's mauled the head, look?
Yeah, so it has. Yeah, it's very good.
No prisoners.
But when it comes to Conger, I'd like to think I'd always have the edge.
worst bit is trying
Until,
not
of
to
course,
puff, innit,
he's
you know,
watched this
when you bring up
video.
a rock.
Then, if I've got it right, he'll be joining the Conger Club. So let's work together now and convert dead stones to live eels. We're back on Vagabond, out of Plymouth, with my lucky charm Bill Warner heading to a wreck just 30 miles out to sea. It's the middle of June, and surprisingly, my 50 is still the biggest eel so far this year. Well, on rod and line anyway, from a charter boat, caught by a stumpy little unfit Plymouthian who's right-handed, pigeon-toed and myopic, on a sunny day when the wind was chipping from the east and Roger had his back turned, blah blah blah. Record breaking seems to be getting so obscure these days. There isn't enough space on the IGFA form to put all that stuff. Talking of records, a 350-pound thresher shark was brought in on a trawler net last week. Big fish for Cornish waters. But we have to hunt up some smaller species first, the sometimes elusive mackerel. Strangely enough, this week mackerel have been caught a mile from my house on the River Severn, 16 miles up from the bridge. They haven't been up that stretch of water for 20 years. Not in shoals anyway. Strange things are happening to the sea, as well as the weather during the 1990s. I hope some of the lessons we've learnt help rebalance the books for the anglers of the next millennium. In the meantime, I also hope that not all mackerel are holidaying near Gloucester. We need some to tempt wily great conger. It is without doubt the best possible bait. Freshly caught, they are rich in oil and firm in flesh.
Alright, nothing on. So at the moment we're still searching for them. But because there's a reasonable run of tide, I'm finding the mackerel feathers moving away from the boat. So I'm going to up the weight a little to 8 ounces. Probably what Roger's running. You on 8 ounces, Roger?
Yes, I'm on 8 at the moment.
Then we'll get a cleaner, faster drop and back down again. Searching all the time, keeping the thumb gently on the spool to just control the drop. As you can possibly see from the end of the line, I'm using a nice Pen blue Dyna braid here for better visibility today. We've got a cleaner, straighter drop and we're into mackerel. At about 40 foot, Roger. Drop down cleaner then. Keep in contact with all the fish. Not many on, so at this point it isn't the time to be a little bit lackadaisical and let it relax to try and get more. We'll settle for whatever fish I can bring up. And there's one small joey to start the day. Unhook the single fish myself by keeping the weight over the side of the boat so there's no damage or weight there. Well, I can go home now, really. One in the box. Oh, Roger, just to let you know, I caught that on black feather.
I've never seen a mackerel caught on a black feather. Never.
And straight down again. So a change of weight has got me straighter, less hassle by the tide, and down quicker to the fish. You're there too. So again, dropping under control, thumb on. And one of the nice advantages of the Pen 320 GTI really is the level wind. I can adequately level wind with no problem at all. But with mackerelling, I don't have to think about it because it's just taking the line onto the spool perfectly neatly. Up we come again. Sometimes with the run of the tide when it's strong, it's a little difficult to tell if you've got a fish on. Especially when they're joeys. A bit further than 40 feet, clunk, and nothing there.
Mackerel has the best scent, and in the dark 200 feet down, conger are feeding by sense of smell. They're not very keen on frozen bait. This has been proven by divers who have hand-fed conger on wrecks over the years. If mackerel are sparse, go to a fishmonger before using frozen. Make sure that the monger doesn't know you want them for conger, otherwise you could be fobbed off with yesterday's softies. They may be cheaper, but they will not be as effective. If frozen is the only option, then make sure you thaw them out completely before presenting them. Always best though to fish for fresh bait, even at the cost of some congering time if need be.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how they come in.
You can be sporting and fish for them on light tackle, but for me, mackerelling for conger needs to be quick, effective and controlled. I catch only what I need, some for the pan at tea time and a few for the freezer for other species.
Shallow now, yeah?
Tackle-wise, a 12 or 20 pound class rod matched with a small multiplier loaded with 20 pound line is a good combination. Don't make the mistake of trying to fish for them with a fixed spool reel. You just can't drop down fast enough. On the end, you need 6 hooks of any combination you like. Feathers of various colours, flapjack lures, little eels, hawkeye lures, miniature muppets, etc. Whatever works. I use 3 feathers, sometimes black ones just to wind Roger up. Above 3 hawkeye, all from mustard. Give them a whirl, see what you think.
Hawkeye, mustads,
4 to 6 ounces of lead, sometimes 8, on the end, drops the rig down quickly if the fish are shoaling deep. A big splash gets as much air into the feathers as possible, increasing attractiveness, and when the mackerel start to feed, if you're in the right spot, you can't go wrong.
It's a cracking pair of gloves you got there, Bill.
Booties, isn't they?
High visibility gloves.
High vis.
They're a fiery little fish, they're a hell of a fighter, I tell you. You put half a dozen of those on a string and give the rods to your average 10-year-old and he's going to be having the scrap of his life.
Fishing odds have now increased to 20 minutes.
If the fish are coming up fast, keep your catch over the side until the crew are ready to unhook them. When you bring them in, secure your weight, leaving tension on the line. The crew can then release the mackerel quickly, and very importantly, it reduces the risk of people getting hooked up.
About 30 feet, I would think, Liam.
Okay. At the end of the day, this is an easy accident. But being good professional anglers, Roger's carrying the first aid kit to deal with hook damage and bait knife wounds. Being a bit of a Jessie, I'm probably going to pass out. Is that your best hanky?
Carry on.
Thank you very much. Now, it might seem a bit namby, but I'm actually going to put a plaster on that one because it's going to get right in the way of my cranking otherwise. Thanks, Rog. Always remember, shake all the blood into the sea to improve the ground bait.
Sometimes you'll pull up whiting or even herring. Herring is another oily fish and a good secondary bait. As is calamari squid, a particularly smelly bait in fish terms, popular with ling. A couple of boxes on board can offer variety in the shape of cocktail baits. Also, net in any cuttlefish you see floating around when you're steaming to the location. But at the end of the day, successful conger fishing can depend on the quality and quantity of the mackerel catch. With the bait secured, it's time to steam to the chosen wreck. Dry out the feathers, stow the mackerel in gear, and tackle up for conger. Prepare some bait, loosen the butt pad straps to cater for the extra £5 you've put on since last time you wore it, and keep a good watch for passing shipping and wildlife. The drop of engine revs means the skipper has found his mark, and the shape of an old hulk has appeared on the sounder. Now the most difficult task in wreck fishing begins, and an experienced conger team wisely leave the skipper and crew to themselves while they anchor the boat. The equation is half mathematical and half instinctive. Tide one way, wind the other, and at what angle is the wreck lying and which part fished the best in the past. Bit like reversing round a corner with your eyes shut, only no curbs to bounce off and guide you. And because the tide and wind is constantly pushing the boat along until the anchor sets, the skipper may have to steam up to half a mile away, drop anchor and drift back to bring both anchor and boat onto target. This is one of the greatest skills a skipper has to master, and if he's having a tough time, be tolerant. The wait will always be worth it. A well-anchored, well-located fishing platform is way better than fishing on the drift. With the boat anchored and the first baits already prepared en route, the first drops of the day are quickly making their way to the dark layers 200 feet below.
Well, it's my favourite moment in any congering trip. The first drop of the day. Everything's kitted, everything's sorted. This is my great moment. But on the mackerelling I had 3 and Roger had 15. So the odds are a bit stacked against me. We'll have a go and see what happens with the bigger fish. It's ever so important to get yourself sorted out before you start to conger fish. You just don't know how soon after a bait hits the bottom you can actually be in contact, and you also don't know what size of fish you can actually be in contact with either. So before you get going, even though it's tempting to slosh it all down there and get on with it, talk to the skipper, work out what he thinks about the tide and how much weight you should have on there. And for this first drop I'm going to drop down with 1.5 pound of lead, which is a bit butch for me, but we'll manage. I've got a head on instead of a flapper with a bit of nice juicy bits hanging off. My butt pad's ready, my towel's in position, my plaster's on me cut thumb, but I've got a spare glove in case it gives me any jip as well. And even my Veals harness is within reach in case, we don't know, dear, hopefully there's 138 pounds waiting for me. So we're off and away, down for the first drop of the day, lowering the whole lot under control so nothing twists and tangles. Take time, let it go. Big weight does the job. It's very important when it actually gets down there to make sure that you are holding bottom. Remember that 90% of the fish caught in British waters are bottom feeders, and our primary target today, the conger, is not slapping about 20 feet or so above the wreckage. He's cruising around all those little holes and tucks and bits of rusty gap, and we're down. And we met with quite a solid bump. I'll lift it, have another feel. Not muddy, not weedy, seem to be holding. Line's going to drift that way a bit, so I'm going to end up turning slightly round. We'll see how much line actually needs to be taken to hold bottom. And with a bit of luck, none. So we're off and away. The reel's now into gear and the clutch is set, so that if a big fish took it and ran, there is room to go. But equally so, if I want to load the rod and lift the fish, I am effective. I'm putting pressure onto its head, so I don't have the clutch too slack. Finding where that clutch should be is a matter of experience. Are you in there? Yeah. Eh? And Bill's got a pollock. What sort of bang, Bill? What did it feel like? Small. Yeah, yeah. Don't notice it much at that range. Pretty fish. Pretty fish. Neatly lit, hooked right through the top. One fish on black. What is it? It's an Eddystone lure, that, isn't it? See, amazing, isn't it? Black lures down there. Look at the lovely colourings on this. This is what identifies a pollock. Big lower lip extended beyond the top, and a lateral line that breaks down. Isn't that gorgeous? Well done, Bill.
Big conger requires strong but sensitive gear. Rods need to be 30 to 50 pound class, fitted with an appropriately sized multiplier reel. Any roller logically reduces friction, and there is a growing trend for all roller rods and indeed some ringless rods. My personal feelings and experiences say there isn't a fish in British waters you can't land without these extras. An ordinary rod and reel of the right class is fine. The main line is 50 pound breaking strain sea tamer made by Mason in the good old US survey. It's superbly consistent throughout the spool and has a slightly oily feel to it, which must reduce line friction through the rings. It also knots very well, an important factor on big lines. The end tackle is a simple sliding ledger. On the main line, a sliding weight carrier enabling quick changes of weight as the tide run increases or decreases. On the end of the main line, a strong link swivel, again enabling quick trace changes. The point being that if your rig is high and dry, you're not in a position to catch conger. The quicker you get tackle back down, the greater the odds in your favour. The trace is 18 inches of 120 to 150 pound monofilament, terminating in a 9/0 bronze hook. Mustad are the kings. Some anglers use wire traces. I'm not so keen, because if they kink when snagged on wrecking, they weaken. I prefer the forgiveness of the elasticity of monofilament. You can't tie 150 pound line very easily, so crimps are essential. Apart from varying the length of the trace for different conditions and states of tide, this is the basic system upon which most conger are caught. Take at least 20 spare traces and as many weights. A variety of sizes from 1.5 pounds to just 8 ounces. It's no fun to run out, and learning to keep your hook bait in contact with the bottom and yet not snag the wreckage can be an expensive lesson during the learning curve. Additional tackle required for conger would be a good filleting knife for bait, a butt pad, and for a big scrapper, a shoulder harness can give your arms and back some respite. These sensibly priced and very reliable models, specially produced by Veal's mail order, are ideal. I've taken fish in excess of 300 pounds on this model. They'll never let you down.
You filthy animal.
Hey!
I think we could have done quite well if we could hold this properly.
Yeah. Well, each time you've got it back on, we've been bang on the mark. And I've been into bite straight away. I'll tell you that, give me an early bang away. I'm not ready to declare conger, but I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Weighing nicely.
Unfortunately, that's when a lot of people lose congers, when they mess around to try and get it into their butt pad. It should be the first thing they do.
Yeah, my fault there as well. My fault there was having the bloody end cap on. Here we go. There's a bill one wet enough already. Ooh. Come here, bugger. Fish coming up. I nearly want a photo of the presentation there, Bill. I hooked right in the top lip. That'll do. Right, all yours, my man. What do you reckon?
About £38.
38 pounder. Lovely. And away, Jude.
We've already covered the topic of what bait to use. Let's now look at the various methods of presentation. Firstly, the mackerel. There are lots of options that in the end boil down to personal choice, and this choice comes from experience. Firstly though, we'll start with the flapper. Take one whole mackerel and cut off the tail. This stops the bait spinning in the water, particularly as the presentation is lowered. Cut down either side of the backbone as if you were filleting the fish, but leave the sides on. Then take out the backbone. Pass the hook in through the mouth and out through the top of the hard crown on a mackerel's head, and there you have it, a flapper. To increase the flow of juices and up the scent value, you may choose an additional option that I apply, and that is small cuts down the sides of the bait. This makes some enticing tendrils that I believe conger find appealing. Next we have a solid side of mackerel. Take a whole fish and again cut off the tail. Then remove a fillet totally from one side only. Pass the hook in through the mouth and out through the side of the bait fish, making sure the barb is well exposed. This lumpier presentation can be quite effective when the tide run has stopped or when bites are tentative, because it makes for a still bait in calm conditions. Finally, there's the head and a fillet presentation, usually used when bait is getting sparse. Don't throw anything away until the end of the session, by the way. Many's the time I've been grateful for a bit of backbone when the bait has gone too quickly. Take a head of mackerel and pass the hook again in through the mouth and out through the top. Take a fillet and hook it on below the head. This wavy presentation can be quite effective as an attractor. You can also cocktail the head with calamari if you choose, or use calamari with fillet, etc. This combination is good for attracting ling or cod if you have an interest in filling your freezer. That'll have to be it in the bait department. Let's take a look at some favourite angling moments from the past while I rabbit on about conditions, tides and location of fish. So what are the best conditions to go congering? Neap tides are the favourites, some skippers preferring a little more run of tide than others. Bill can anchor in any tide up to a 5 metre, but he is an exception. I always prefer to fish for conger anchored, primarily because of the loss of fishing time when you constantly have to haul in and motor back up tide at the end of the drift. I reckon you lose at least 25% of your fishing day on the drift, and despite their reputation for being aggressive, conger are shy biters. Often the biggest of fish gives the lightest of bites. If the bait is always rolling past, then they don't get a lot of time to weigh up the options. Reasonable sea conditions make obviously for easier and cleaner presentation. When the boat is bouncing up and down the vertical plane, you are constantly raising and lowering the rod to counter the action of the craft in order to keep contact with the bottom. You don't want your bait bouncing up and down in front of a conger's mouth. But at the end of the day, your luck can depend on the skipper you've chosen. One with plenty of experience, an instinct for the fish, and also a passion. A skipper can only guide you to the fish. He can't catch them for you. But his reputation is what earns his bookings, and the grapevine can tell you a lot. I drive a 380-mile round trip to Bill at Plymouth, and if he's not available for my trips, I go see Lloyd Saunders at Dartmouth, another record holder whose boat Saltwind of Dart has a fine number of notches in her belt. But before I venture either way, I listen to the skippers, and occasionally Bill has disappointed me with those honest and reliable words, "We'll catch Conger tomorrow, Liam." He's always been right, and never just grabbed the booking fee and banged me around the channel anyway.
God.
So, neat tides maybe, with a bit of run, calm or calmish conditions, and the advice of a skipper who doesn't insist on steaming over the horizon for 3 hours only to fish for 2 and steam all the way back again. Regrettably, netters have greatly damaged our inshore wrecks over recent years, but I for one like to head to the old wrecks that many other skippers bomb past, especially when I'm congering in my 16-foot boat. But that, as they say, is another story, or in our case, probably another video. The next topic for consideration has to be where you go for conger. As a species, they are of course scattered right around the British Isles, but generally a smaller stamp of fish. It appears that the further south, the bigger they get, although I'm sure there must be biggies tucked away in corners all over the place. It's just that nobody specifically goes and fishes for them up north. The conger likes a lair, and is therefore found around rocky headlands, old piers, jetties and such like. The specific haunts of the shore fishermen. Devil's Point in Plymouth is the spot where the shore record is held, a 50-pound class fish. But for big eels you must take to a boat, and although large specimens are taken along the south coast of Britain, the best of the bunch in terms of consistent size are taken along the southwest corner, with Plymouth being the conger capital of Europe. With a boat you have 2 choices. Reef caught fish, the real wild ones with a larger territory, are found competing with all other species for food and are therefore tough scrappers, faster feeders, but on the whole smaller. Reefs are often more accessible for the small boat angler, easier to find. With a sounder they cover larger areas so that the point of anchoring is less critical. The fish roam more, so that the approach is generally easier. Even without a GPS, simple navigation with a compass, landmarks and a good eye for telltale crab pot markers can give you enough pointers to put you on a reef. East and west ruts out of Plymouth are good examples. Sensible distances with good fishing for small boats. Wrecks are more difficult. GPS can get you within 25 to 50 yards if you've got a latitude and longitude. Then you have to work out your position in relation to the wreck with the sounder. A more difficult task, and one we won't go into here. Then you have to anchor over that wreck, and in a small boat skittering around the surface, that is a great challenge. There's a wonderful technique using 2 buoys, one smaller than the other, that I'll go into in another and more appropriate video for the small boat angler. In the meantime, the best way to go for the biggest conger is to go on a charter boat, head to the wrecks and leave the really difficult stuff to the crews who do it daily. Let's now look at what happens when you get a conger on your line and the relevant methods of fish play. Fish play on wrecks is a different ballgame to any other. Vigilance is the key element. When waiting for a bite, I'd advise never putting your reel into free play. The only time you would use free spool is when you have a fish that has found home and you're trying to fool it into believing it's not hooked anymore. Apart from then, keep the clutch firm, the rod in your hand and your eyes on the tip. As soon as you have contact, load the rod and try to get a firm hook hold. Bear in mind that over 200 feet of monofilament has a substantial stretch factor, and so quite a big firm swing is necessary to bring pressure to bear at the foot end. At the same time you make that contact, the eel will realise that all is not well, and if not successfully hooked, will drop the bait and head for home. If you're hooked up, he's going to head for home anyway, backwards, forwards, any way he can. This unique species has the ability to wrap its tail round any useful obstruction, and he will hang on until the death if he doesn't feel the pressure release on his head.
Yeah, it's definitely an eel. Not a big one.
So when you get that firm hold at the other end, load the rod with a confident and strong movement, and then wind like hell to get the fish away from any tempting wreckage. If you can clear the obstruction, you're in with a chance. So try to take on board how much line you've retrieved, as well as playing the fish. When you're in clear water and you've created a bit of leeway, then you're in with a chance, but it's not over yet. Some eels will sprint to the top at a surprising rate. It's important to keep contact with the fish at all times, and you must reel in like crazy in order not to give any slack line. When they see light, they often change their mind, and full of energy will dive again to the bottom, whereupon you must set the clutch effectively to let the reel fight the fish through the compression of the rod. This is letting the tools work for you, so that you reserve your energy for the fight. If you judge it badly, or don't keep in touch with the depth of the fish in relation to the bottom, he'll find the wreck and you'll lose. Get it right, and he won't quite make bottom. The fish will stop, and you start the whole process all over again. At this stage, using the compression of the rod is the name of the game. Lift the fish, watching the rod tip all the time. When it goes into compression, you are loading the rod, and a surprising amount of pressure is on the head of the fish. As the rod opens back out, lower it quickly and crank in the now easily reeled section of line. Wind in fast enough so that it never goes slack. Repeat this process, and 4 feet at a time, the fish will come to the surface. One quick tip here. Never lift your rod to the absolute vertical or beyond. If the fish suddenly turns towards you, you've got nowhere to go. And suddenly you've got some slack line and are threatened with fish loss. All my experience of angling is developed with particularly big fish that have muscle and size to fight back. They are a great way to learn the real physics of successful angling. And the principles apply whatever size of fish you're after and with whatever class of tackle. My other quick tip is about striking. Practical and relevant to small fish is the quick strike that sets a hook home. My experience with big fish is to allow them to set the hook by loading the rod at my end with a firm but controlled movement, and then using my strength to hold the fish in situ while its own resistance and body weight sets the hook. This again is a matter of practice, and you'll find your own way of dealing with the strike. Back to the action. As the fish comes to the surface, it will see light, boat and feel vibration as well as hear sound through its sensors, and at this point it will choose probably to have another attempt at escape. Even though the fish may be beaten, they can come up with a surprising amount of energy for a last-ditch attempt. Always have your hand near the clutch in order to give the fish a loaded but free run if it should choose to tear off again. Many fish are lost at the surface just as the angler thinks he's won, because the clutch is set too tight and the fish's power breaks the now short and not so elastic main line. Another quirk of the conger is to spin on the surface, making it very difficult for the skipper to gaff. The skipper has to judge his moment carefully, because a big fish of over 50 pounds suddenly gaffed can take that gaff right out of inexperienced hands, and as it is unknowingly armed, cracked wrists and fingers can result. If the conger should start to spin, keep the fish in the water, but put pressure on its head with a loaded rod and bide your time. It's important at this stage not to give any slack line, or it will immediately get wrapped around the body of the fish and is simply cut. At the right time, the skipper will gaff the fish or swing it aboard by hand, dependent on the weight, and you must immediately give slack line so that the skipper can have full control of the fish. If you've tired the eel out successfully in the water, then the fight is over. If you've brought what is called a green fish to the surface, then all hell can break loose, and suddenly a conger will carry on the scrap inside the boat. Apart from sliding all over the boat, and a fish of over 50 pounds has a lot of pressure when it goes for a walk, they are difficult to grab because they weren't designed with handles. There tends to be a rather funny scene where the less cool anglers start to scatter while a puffing skipper and crew chase 5 foot of eel around the fish deck. Eels are known to snap away at this stage, thus giving them the reputation for being ferocious. The bite is instinctive, however, and they will latch on to other eels when they are in the fish box. Bits of boat if they can find it, and occasionally a foot, as can be seen here. Although I'm squeaking away, this conger was not attacking me. He was just upset, and if I'm dozy enough to fend him off with my foot, then he's going to latch on to an easy target. The techniques for playing reef fish are different. You can afford to relax with the angling, well, a bit, and set the reel with the clutch in free play, but the ratchet set. Give the fish time to take the bait, then lock in, strike the hook home, and hang on for a fine ride.
Well done, the carp man.
This easier approach is because you're dealing with a lot less handicaps, and by this I mean snaggy material, wreckage, masts, towers, turrets and such like. The feeding eel on a reef has ventured from his home and has to leg it back to sanctuary before he can give you particular trouble. Given this so-called easier approach, reef fishing is a good learning ground for new conger anglers. You can often catch a lot more fish without having to wade through the resident ling of a wreck. My 9-year-old will go reef fishing this summer. I wouldn't load him with the responsibility of wreck fishing for a couple more years. Apart from the difficulty of the angling and his lack at this age of the strength needed to cope with a big fish, and remember that you can't legislate for size when wreck fishing, there's also the conservation angle. The less line and less hooks hanging from conger, the better preservation of the species in the future.
Absolutely.
We're now staggering towards the end of this programme, and as always when writing an angling script, there seems so much to still say, but time is against us. So let's edit down some topics. Other species when conger fishing include the wonderful ling. A member of the cod family, it is a good eater, and being a swim bladder fish, it isn't possible to return them. Take some placky bags in your tackle box and load to the freezer. Good eater, but not much cop as a bait. You can, of course, catch a good cod sometimes, a bonus fish. If you're being pestered by pout, up the size of the bait, but don't be surprised at not putting off this annoying but fearless species. Wreck-caught pollock can be record breakers and are great to fish for on artificial lures with a long flowing trace and 20-pound class tackle. You can have some really good scraps, and if the skipper advises that conditions have changed and aren't that suitable for conger, then as long as you've got some lures, a few booms and smaller hooks on board, the day does not need to be a disappointment. My main tip for pollocking is lower your 10, 12, 15 foot trace under control to avoid tangling on your main line. Most pollock take on the retrieve, so it's a pleasantly active part of wreck fishing. One last tip really with the pollock is that you can't wind in fast enough. When Bill's pollocking with me and teaching, he says to me, black and decker, black and decker, black and decker, black and decker, which makes me wind faster and faster. You can't get ahead of a pollock. If he wants it, he'll chase. A coley is another bonus fish and a great fighter. I haven't got any footage of one, but here's Lloyd in younger days with a beautiful specimen. Just off the wreck itself, other superb species are living, usually in the sandbanks that build up around the hulk. Rays, turbot and monkfish. Even the unusual anglerfish are taken. The wreck becomes a miniature world with its own self-contained ecosystem. Over the top can shoal mackerel and herring. The more popular the wreck is with trawlers, the more difficult they are to fish. Not only because of the reduction of residents, but the debris of abandoned netting which can cause havoc to a rod angling party. Wrecks can develop reputations for being costly in tackle, but effective in great big beasties who take time to cover a bait and have less competition now that smaller fish have mostly been taken. One area we should consider is the welfare of the angler. Congering is not a fishing trip, it's an adventure. A day averaging 10 hours. Although conditions might have been superb when you set out, and you have Ian McCaskill's assurance that we are in the middle of a heat wave, the weather can change at a surprisingly fast rate 30 or 40 miles out to sea. The safety record of the Plymouth and South West charter fleets is second to none. But I, for one, am an independent character and like to pose myself the following question. What would happen if it all went wrong for whatever reason, accepting that all the equipment is there on board, we have VHF radio, we are trackable on satellite? What if I went over 30 miles out to sea with no assistance? I've got a realistic understanding of my physical condition, my excess 2 stone, and my lack of exercise. I wouldn't last very long. So in my tackle box, there's always a single handheld flare, and tucked at all times in my pocket is a folded up child's rubber ring. That's it. Let's look now, though, at the more cheery and positive points to protect the angler. 2 hours steaming to a wreck in poor conditions early in the day can be taxing, let alone cold and wet. Suitable clothing is important. Keeping the wind out is more vital than keeping out water. Wear many layers of clothing. It's easier to take things off than it is to put on what you haven't got. Sea boots are essential. Sealed tops restrict water access and are easily kicked off if you end up in the drink. Trainers are just too slippery in a wet boat, and if you get soaked early in the day, it's a long time until you can dry your feet out. For those with less hair, hats are important, protecting your head not only from the cold, but also from the penetrating heat of the sun. I've watched many a dome go turkey red before the sun is even at half-mast. Sun protection cream is also useful for the angler who doesn't work outdoors, as is lip chap cream. Whilst buying that stuff at the chemist, don't forget the seasick tablets. To go down on a trip is a seriously unpleasant experience. You won't die, but you might wish you had. I've destroyed a few film crews in my time, but I've only had one close shave, myself, in about 10 years. I take quells before I even venture out on a mill pond. I'm always better safe than sorry. Grub and liquid, of course. As most of my fishing is done with a camera pointing at me, I am mostly hyperactive, and unless my partner was shoving food down my throat occasionally, I would end up unfed and shaking from lack of sugar. You'd be surprised at the statistic covering how much fluid we lose during a windy day's angling. Notice how little you need to go to the loo. That's covered most things I can in the time given. But what of the fish we're going to catch with this new wealth of knowledge? Cod, ling and pollock all of course go successfully to the pan, freezer and fish market. But the conger is not a popular eating fish. Some people like it. You cut them into steaks and poach the slices in milk and butter, occasionally adding a splash of Bailey's Irish cream and loads of black pepper. But as it is one species without a swim bladder, it is easily returned and will recover quickly as it sprints back down into the depths. So why not return all the conger to grow, conserve and scrap another day? I can understand reluctance when a fish is a personal best or a potential record, but with a bit of assistance from the skipper and a well-placed gaff, the photos are achievable when the fish are alive and can then be returned. It's one of the main reasons for encouraging the use of bronze hooks, as these mean that traces can be cut at no risk to eel or man, and it is but a short time until that hook perishes. Personally, my days for keeping conger are over. I love the fight. They are tremendous scrappers, and I've enjoyed the ignorant past of leaving 40 pound of conger in the bath for my family to find the following morning. But those days are gone, and I actually regret the loss of many of the fish I didn't return. The conger eel is a resilient, clever and strong quarry. Treated properly, we can scrap with them for generations to come. The irony in ways is that all these big fish are barren females, sometimes up to perhaps 50 years old. To conclude, I turn to the words of that famous Shakespearean angler. To conger or not to conger? That is the question. But to return them all, that is the answer.